His attorney leaned closer and whispered something, just a few quiet words. And suddenly, Daniel's face changed. That confident, almost arrogant expression I had seen every morning across the kitchen table for 15 years disappeared completely. The color drained from his face. His fingers tightened around the documents he had been so eager to sign just seconds earlier. Now they trembled slightly at first, then uncontrollably, like he was holding something that might explode. And me. For the first time in 3 years, I smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we dive deeper into what really happened, take a moment to subscribe, but only if you believe in something simple. Family should be built on trust, respect, and truth, not control or betrayal. And I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? And what's the temperature like there right now? This story is fictional, but it's inspired by real-life family situations. It's been carefully crafted with the help of AI to bring out the emotions, the tension, and the meaning behind moments that many people quietly live through every day. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand that moment, you need to understand everything. You need to understand how a woman everyone believed was weak, broken, even foolish, ended up playing the longest, quietest game of her life. My name is Alice Parker. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Daniel Hayes. 15 years. 15 years of marriage. That's longer than most relationships last. Longer than most people stay in one place. And definitely longer than I should have stayed. But I've always been stubborn. I got that from my grandmother. I met Daniel when I was 17. I had just graduated high school early, not because I was exceptionally gifted, but because I was determined. Determined to leave home. Determined to build something of my own. I landed a job at a small firm called Carter & Wells Legal Services. File clerk, minimum wage, endless paperwork, paper cuts on almost every finger, but it was mine, by 18. I had already worked my way up to a legal assistant. I learned quickly numbers, documents, contracts. I paid attention. I stayed quiet. I observed everything. That was always my strength. Daniel was 24 when we met. We crossed paths at a client networking event. He was charming in that effortless way, confident, smooth, always saying exactly the right thing at the right time. He talked about the future like it was already guaranteed, like success was just waiting for him to arrive. He told me he was going to build a real estate empire, something big, something unforgettable. I told him I could help him organize the paperwork. Romantic. Right. We got married when I was 19. Our son, Ethan, was born when I was 20. I kept working part-time at the firm while raising him, saving every extra dollar I could, quietly building a small financial cushion. My grandmother used to say, a woman should always have her own money, not hidden money. She would clarify, just hers, something no one else could touch. At 23, Daniel's business finally started to grow. That's when everything changed. He came to me one evening and said he needed help, real help. He needed someone he could trust completely, someone to manage finances, coordinate projects, handle clients, keep everything running behind the scenes. He asked me to leave my job and join him full-time. So I did. I stepped away from my career and stepped into his world. From that moment on, I became everything: bookkeeper, office manager, client coordinator, interior consultant for his model properties, marketing planner, event organizer. I handled schedules, payments, contractors, negotiations, everything that kept his business moving, all while raising our son, all while running our home, all while making sure everything and everyone functioned perfectly. My official role? Wife. My real role? Everything else. For 11 years, I gave everything I had to build Daniel's dream. And, for 11 years, he took all the credit, the awards, the recognition, the applause. At every industry event, I stood beside him, smiling politely while people praised his vision, his leadership, his success. I was introduced the same way every time. This is my wife, Alice, just the wife. At every celebration, he thanked his partners, his investors, his mentors. He thanked everyone who had helped him along the way. Everyone, except me. Somewhere along the line, things began to change. At first, it was subtle. He stopped asking for my opinion on business decisions. Meetings happened without me. Plans were made without my input. Then came the late nights, more frequent, less explained. Then the criticism. Small at first. The way I dressed. Too plain. The meals I cooked. Too repetitive. The way I spent my time. Not productive enough. My lack of ambition. That one almost made me laugh. I was managing his entire business behind the scenes. Raising our son. Keeping our household running. Solving problems he didn't even know existed. But apparently, I wasn't ambitious enough. And then, 3 months ago, everything cracked open. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember because I was making his favorite dinner. I always did that on Tuesdays. Old habits, I guess. He walked in, loosened his tie, and asked me to sit down. There was something about his tone. Flat. Controlled. Not emotional. Not hesitant. Just transactional. I sat across from him at the kitchen table. The same table where we had eaten thousands of meals together. Where we had celebrated birthdays, helped Ethan with homework, talked about our future. And he looked at me like I was a business problem. I want a divorce, he said. No build-up, no explanation. Just that. Before I could even process it. He continued, I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. A brief pause. You can keep Ethan. He said it so casually, like he was placing an order, assets for him, responsibility for me, as if our 15-year-old son was some optional item he was politely declining. I just stared at him. 15 years. And this was how it ended. At our kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish. Like I was just another thing he had decided he no longer needed. What I didn't know in that moment, what I wouldn't understand until much later, was that this hadn't been impulsive. Daniel had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer, Richard Coleman, high profile, expensive. The kind of attorney people hire when they intend to win at all costs. While I was grocery shopping, organizing schedules, making sure his life ran smoothly, he had been quietly building his exit strategy. I hadn't just been left. I had been outplayed. The next day, his mother arrived, Margaret Hayes. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect expression of rehearsed sympathy. She walked into my home like she belonged there more than I did. She sat beside me, patted my hand, and sighed softly. I think you should have tried harder to keep him happy. Dear, she said gently. Her voice carried that same tone people use when explaining something obvious to a child. Men have needs. Of course they do. Margaret had always been full of advice about marriage, which was ironic considering her own husband spent most of his life on a golf course just to avoid being around her. But somehow, I was the one who had failed. That first week passed in a blur. Daniel moved me into the guest room without discussion. Papers appeared, documents, agreements, timelines. Everything was already prepared, structured, organized, controlled, just like everything else in his life. Except this time, I was the one being managed. If you believe what he did, walking away from his family and treating the person who built everything with him like she meant nothing was justified, then comment right. But if you feel that betrayal, manipulation, and cold indifference can never be excused, then comment wrong. Sometimes. The way we judge others reveals exactly who we are inside. Everything was happening so fast it felt like I couldn't catch my breath. To everyone else, I was exactly what I looked like. A woman whose life had just collapsed. A wife discarded after 15 years. A victim who never saw it coming. And honestly, I let them believe that, because the truth was, there was something Daniel didn't know. Something no one knew. 3 years ago, I had found something, hidden deep inside his financial records. Something he believed was buried beyond discovery. And from that moment on, I had been preparing, quietly, patiently, carefully. But no one saw that version of me. They only saw the woman falling apart. Within a week of his announcement, Daniel had taken complete control of everything. The guest room was no longer temporary. It became my space, my closet. Once a walk-in filled with years of memories, was reduced to 2 small sections he allowed me to keep. Allowed. That word said everything. The message was clear without him ever needing to say it out loud. This is no longer your home. 2 weeks later, he stopped pretending altogether. That's when she appeared. Chloe Bennett, 27, an employee at his company. Of course she was. She had that flawless, effortless look people build entire social media profiles around. Perfect hair, perfect nails, clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. She walked into my kitchen like she had always belonged there, wearing my apron, my grandmother's apron, standing at my counter, using my blender, making herself a smoothie like she was testing out a new lifestyle. She was younger than our marriage, younger than some of the furniture in that house. But apparently, she made excellent smoothies. So that must have counted for something. Daniel didn't even try to hide it. He showcased her, like a prize he had just won. They sat on my couch, watched my television, ate from my plates, and he would casually put his arm around her right in front of me, like I wasn't even there, like I had already faded out of existence. The humiliation didn't come all at once. It built slowly, day by day. First, he canceled my personal credit card. "We need to separate finances," he said, like he was being logical. Then the joint account. Then came the suggestion. Maybe it would be better if I found somewhere else to stay while things were being finalized. Somewhere else. In the home I had helped build from nothing. Then Margaret returned. This time, to help me pack. And by help, I mean, she went through my life piece by piece and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes. Fine. Family photos. Only some of them. She picked them like she was curating a collection. Then she found my grandmother's recipe box. She paused, held it for a moment longer than necessary, like she was considering whether it belonged to me at all. In the end, she put it aside. Everything else of value, not mine. Jewelry Daniel had given me over 15 years, furniture I had chosen, paid for, lived with, anything worth something. Marital assets, she explained calmly, and Daniel is entitled to them. She packed my things into garbage bags. Not boxes. Garbage bags. Like I was being removed from the house the same way you take out something unwanted. Something disposable. Through all of this, I had one person I believed I could still trust. Rachel Lawson. We had been friends since high school. 20 years of shared history. Breakups. celebrations, late-night calls, life changes. She was the first person I called after Daniel told me he wanted a divorce. She showed up immediately. She listened. She brought wine. She sat beside me while I cried and told me I didn't deserve any of this. She checked in constantly, always asking how I was doing, always ready to be there. And in those moments, I believed her. She told me I deserved better. She told me Daniel was making a huge mistake. And I nodded. Because that's what you do when someone is comforting you. But something didn't feel right. At first, it was small things, almost unnoticeable. Daniel seemed to know things he shouldn't. When I mentioned to Rachel that I was considering fighting for the house, Ethan came home the next day and said his father had already told him it wouldn't happen. When I told her I had started looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, Daniel casually mentioned that exact area being way out of my price range. The same area, the same words. That's when it clicked. Not all at once, but like pieces of a puzzle finally locking into place. And when I looked back, I realized I should have seen it years ago. The way Rachel's face lit up whenever Daniel entered a room, the way she laughed just a little too hard at his jokes, the way she complimented him, just slightly more than necessary. Every conversation we had somehow circled back to him. How's Daniel? How's the business going? Is he happy? She had been paying attention to him for a long time, 15 years. And Daniel, he had always enjoyed attention. He collected admiration the way some people collect expensive watches, carefully, proudly. And he knew exactly how to use it. He made her feel important, special, different from everyone else. I could almost hear the conversations I was never part of, the subtle hints, the vague promises. Just enough to keep her hoping. Just enough to keep her loyal. My best friend was feeding him everything. 20 years of friendship traded for a few smiles and empty possibilities. Honestly, she should have asked for more. But even that betrayal wasn't the worst part. Not even close. The worst part was Ethan. My son saw everything. He saw Chloe walking through our house like she belonged there. He saw Margaret deciding what his mother was worth. He saw the way his father looked at me, like I was already gone. And Daniel didn't stop there. He worked on him. Slowly, carefully, day after day. Your mom is making this harder than it needs to be. I just want things to be peaceful. She's the one dragging this out. I'm trying to be fair. She's not cooperating. Small sentences. Reasonable on the surface. Poison underneath. And it worked. Ethan didn't turn against me. Not completely. But he changed. He grew quieter around me. More distant. More uncertain. Like he didn't know which version of the truth to believe anymore. And Daniel was very good at sounding convincing. I could lose the house. I could lose the money. I could lose everything I had spent 15 years building. But none of that compared to the way my son started looking at me. Like maybe I was the problem. That was the part that hurt. That was the part that cut the deepest. So I did the only thing left to do. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Victoria Salazar. She came highly recommended by my old firm, 52 years old. Sharp, direct. The kind of woman who didn't waste time and didn't tolerate nonsense. She didn't sugarcoat anything. Victoria looked over every detail of my situation, every document, every timeline. And then she leaned back in her chair with complete certainty. You helped build his business, she said firmly. You are legally entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We go after it all. We fight. Her voice carried confidence, precision, control. The kind of confidence that wins cases. I held her gaze for a long moment. Then I asked quietly, "What if I don't want to fight?" The expression on her face shifted instantly. Not confusion. Shock. Like I had just spoken a language she didn't recognize. Like I had suggested something completely irrational. Like sending Daniel a thank you note and wishing him luck. She studied me carefully after that, trying to understand, trying to categorize me, in her mind. I could see it forming, broken, exhausted, defeated. A woman too worn down to stand up for herself. She had no idea who she was sitting across from. I didn't correct her. There was no reason to. A few weeks later, Ethan and I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. A kitchen so small it made my old pantry look spacious. Half of our belongings didn't even fit. Boxes stayed stacked in the corner of Ethan's room, unopened, like quiet reminders of everything we had lost. Or at least, everything we appeared to have lost. Meanwhile, Daniel was busy rewriting the narrative. Photos started appearing online. Him and Chloe, smiling, champagne glasses raised, sunlight, expensive restaurants, carefully chosen angles, new chapter, new energy, blessed. That's what he wrote. Margaret commented almost immediately. So happy for you, sweetheart. You deserve this. Of course he did. Of course she supported him. My sister called me that same night. Furious. You need a real lawyer. She said, someone aggressive. Someone who will take him for everything he has. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had advice. Everyone believed they understood the situation, and everyone saw the same thing. A woman who had given up. A woman who didn't have the strength to fight back. A woman who was letting her husband walk away with everything. They were all wrong, because there is something powerful about being underestimated. When people think you're weak, they stop paying attention. When they think you've already lost, they stop being careful, they relax, they talk more freely, they make mistakes. And that's when you start to see everything clearly. 3 years. That's how long I had been carrying the truth. 3 years of knowing exactly what Daniel had built his entire life on. 3 years of understanding that everything people admired about him wasn't real. It started on an ordinary Tuesday night, 3 years before the divorce. Daniel said he was working late. By then. That wasn't unusual. Late nights had become routine, predictable, expected. I stayed home, going through the company records, reconciling numbers, organizing accounts, the same invisible work I had been doing for years. That's when I noticed it. Something small. A transfer. Out of place. An account I didn't recognize. At first, it looked insignificant. But something about it felt wrong. And I've always trusted that instinct. I kept digging. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A simple error. A misplaced transfer. But then I found another. And another. Different dates. Different amounts. Same pattern. Money quietly moving into accounts I didn't recognize. Accounts I had never approved. That's when I stopped guessing and started investigating. I stayed up that night long after the house went quiet. Midnight passed. Then 1, then 2. By 3 in the morning. I was still at the kitchen table, surrounded by statements and records, following the trail, and what I found made everything inside me go cold. Daniel had been borrowing against everything we owned. The house, the one everyone admired, the one I thought was ours. It had 3 mortgages, layered on top of each other. The total debt was over $1 million, and the house wasn't even worth that much. We weren't building anything. We were sinking. The business was worse. Maxed out credit lines, unpaid taxes, vendor debt, equipment financed with money we didn't have. From the outside, it looked successful. Inside, it was falling apart. Even the cars weren't ours. Leased. Every one of them. We didn't own anything. We were maintaining an illusion, paying for a life we couldn't afford. At 3 in the morning, I ran the numbers again, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. The debt was overwhelming, and the value of everything we owned didn't come close. We weren't ahead. We were buried. So I kept going, tracing every transaction, every transfer, every expense. And slowly, the truth surfaced. Crypto losses. Gone. Gambling. Money disappearing. Then something worse. An apartment. A place I had never seen. Paid for. Furnished. For someone I didn't know. Suddenly, everything made sense. The late nights. The distance. The lies. And the smaller things too. Watches. Clothes. Trips I was never part of. Money that never came home. When I put it all together, the truth was clear. Daniel wasn't building anything. He was stacking debt on top of debt. A structure that looked strong from a distance, but was ready to collapse. We looked successful, but it was all staged. Convincing until you looked closer. My first instinct was to confront him, to demand answers. But I didn't, because I knew him. He would deny it, twist it, blame me, and somehow, I would be the problem. Worse, if he knew I knew, he might start looking into my finances, the things I had kept separate, the things that were mine, because I had listened. To my grandmother, a woman should always have something of her own, not secret, just protected. From my early years, I had built a retirement account, quietly, carefully, and when I left to help Daniel, I never touched it. I let it grow, untouched, and safe from him. By then, that account had grown to nearly $180,000. Every dollar earned by me, every dollar protected by law as separate property. It wasn't tied to Daniel. It wasn't connected to the business. It was mine. And then, there was my grandmother. She passed away when I was 28. And what she left me changed everything more than I realized at the time. $340,000. But it wasn't just the amount that mattered. It was the way she left it. Her will was clear, precise, unambiguous. This money belongs to Alice alone. No shared access, no marital claims, no exceptions. I followed her instructions exactly. I kept it in a separate account. I never mixed it with our household finances, never used it for bills, never touched it for anything related to Daniel's life or his business. 6 years. 6 years of keeping that line perfectly intact. She used to say it all the time. Not secret money, just mine. And in that moment, sitting at that kitchen table surrounded by financial lies, I finally understood just how wise she had been. Altogether, I had a little over $500,000 that was completely protected. Legally, strategically, untouchable. So I didn't confront Daniel. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I did something far more effective. I prepared. I reached out to my uncle, Thomas, retired accountant. Careful, methodical, quiet, the kind of man who didn't speak much. But when he did, you listened. Together. We set up an irrevocable trust for Ethan. Every cent from my retirement account, every dollar from my inheritance, moved into that trust. My name wasn't listed as a beneficiary. Daniel's name was nowhere near it. It belonged to Ethan, for his future, for college, for a home one day, for anything life might throw at him. And most importantly, it was protected, completely beyond Daniel's reach. Then I started documenting everything, not casually, not loosely, systematically. Every mortgage agreement, every loan, every hidden account, every transaction that didn't make sense. I printed copies and stored them at my sister's house. I placed duplicates in a secure deposit box at the bank. I saved digital versions on an encrypted drive. Multiple layers, multiple safeguards. Nothing left to chance. And then, I waited. Because I knew Daniel. Men like him don't stay. They don't fix things. They don't take responsibility. They move on. They chase something newer, something easier, something that makes them feel powerful again. It was never a question of if, only when. So I waited. 3 years. 3 years of watching him dig deeper into a hole he didn't even realize he was creating. 3 years of sitting beside him at dinners, smiling at conversations, attending events where people admired the life we had built, all while knowing that life was nothing more than an illusion balanced on unstable ground. I learned patience, real patience, the kind that doesn't react, the kind that observes, the kind that waits for the right moment. I became very good at pretending. Pretending I didn't see the numbers. Pretending I didn't understand the risks. Pretending I didn't know that everything around us was slowly collapsing. And when Daniel finally sat across from me and asked for the divorce, when he demanded the house, the cars, the business, everything, I had to fight not to smile, because he wasn't asking for assets. He was asking for everything I had already prepared to let him take. He wasn't asking for assets. He was asking for debt. He just didn't know it yet. Back in the present. I sat across from Victoria Salazar and placed 3 thick binders on her desk. 3 years of evidence. Every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account Daniel thought no one would ever trace. She didn't interrupt me. She just opened the first binder and started reading, page after page. Her expression stayed neutral at first, professional, detached. Then it shifted, subtly at first. Her brow tightened. Her posture straightened. By the time she reached the second binder, she wasn't just reviewing anymore. She was analyzing, calculating. By the third, she wasn't even trying to hide it. She was impressed. Nearly an hour passed before she finally looked up at me. "You've known about this for 3 years." "Yes. And you said nothing." I was waiting. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "For what?" "For him to leave." I said calmly. "I knew he would eventually." I held her gaze. "And when he asked for everything, he was really asking for all of this." I lightly tapped the binders. All the debt, every obligation, every liability. He just doesn't understand that yet. Victoria leaned back slowly in her chair. The sympathy she had shown me before was gone. The concern, gone. What replaced it was something entirely different. Respect. Maybe even a little awe. "So when you sign everything over," she said slowly, thinking it through, "you walk away clean." I nodded. "He takes the house, the business, the vehicles, and with them, every mortgage, every loan, every financial burden attached, and your personal assets untouched." I said, "My retirement, my inheritance, completely separate, already secured, and the trust locked." I replied, "For Ethan, untouchable." She was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a reassuring one. A sharp, deliberate smile. The kind of smile that appears when someone realizes they're looking at a winning strategy. "Mrs. Parker," she said, "I believe I owe you an apology." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "I thought you were giving up," she admitted. I smiled back. "Just a little. Everyone does." I paused. That's kind of the point. Something shifted in the way she looked at me after that. Earlier, she had seen someone fragile. Now, she saw something else entirely. Someone who had already played the game 3 moves ahead. The plan was already in place. The numbers had been verified. The documentation was airtight. There was nothing left to build. All that remained was execution. And for that, I only needed one thing: for Daniel to believe he was winning. The next 3 months became a performance. Carefully controlled, precisely executed. I became exactly who everyone expected me to be. A woman who had lost everything. I showed up to mediation sessions with tired eyes and quiet hesitation. My voice softened. My confidence disappeared. I spoke like someone who no longer had the strength to fight. I asked for so little that even the mediator seemed uncomfortable. I just want enough to start over. I said gently during one session, I don't want to make things harder than they already are. I kept my tone calm, understanding, almost apologetic. I know the business means everything to him, I continued. And the house. It's important. I don't want to take that away. Then I made my request. $50,000, my personal belongings, shared custody of Ethan. That was all. Nothing more. No claims. No demands. Just enough to walk away. Daniel didn't hesitate. He agreed immediately. Of course he did. He had expected a fight, a legal battle, a demand for half of everything. That's what any rational lawyer would have pushed for. Instead, I offered him an easy win. From his perspective, I wasn't negotiating. I was surrendering. He looked at me across the table with something that almost resembled pity, like I was broken, like I had already accepted defeat, like he was doing me a favor by ending things quickly. If there had been an award for that performance, I would have won it, because I played my role perfectly, and my only audience was a man who believed he had already won, with each passing week. Daniel grew more confident, more careless. He stopped pretending, stopped maintaining the illusion of fairness. He began telling anyone who would listen. She didn't even fight. He said, I offered her a fair deal, and she took it. His friends nodded. His colleagues agreed. Everyone believed the story he was telling. Margaret, of course, made it worse. She didn't just believe it. She celebrated it. Margaret didn't just support Daniel. She celebrated him. At her book club, at church, at every gathering where people would listen. She repeated the same story. Daniel is keeping everything, she said proudly. She walked away with nothing. I always knew she wasn't strong enough for my son. And people believed her, because from the outside, it looked true. To mark what he thought was his victory, Daniel bought himself a new watch. $15,000. I knew because I saw the charge. Business account. Of course. He was still spending like nothing had changed. Still treating the company like his personal wallet. Still digging deeper into a hole he didn't even see. He wore that watch to our next mediation session. Subtle enough to seem casual. Obvious enough to make a point. A symbol of success. Or at least, what he believed success looked like. Soon after, he took Chloe to dinner at Le Jardin Bleu, the same place we had celebrated our 10th anniversary. He posted photos, smiling, relaxed, effortless. Life is good when you're with the right person. I almost laughed, because the right person had no idea what she had stepped into. She didn't know about the debt, the loans, the reality behind the image. Meanwhile, Chloe was reshaping the house. My house. New furniture. New art. Then the kitchen. The one I had spent weeks perfecting. Choosing the exact shade of green, testing it in every light, making it feel warm, alive. She painted over it. Gray. Flat. Lifeless. Like none of it had ever mattered. It suited her. Neutral. Temporary. Rachel kept calling, always concerned, always checking in. "How are you holding up?" Her voice sounded sincere, almost convincing. "I just want it to be over." I told her, "I don't have the energy to fight." I let my voice crack just enough, let the silence linger. And every time, within hours, Daniel knew. I could feel it. His confidence growing, his guard dropping. Rachel thought she was helping. In reality, she was passing along everything I said, without even realizing it. But while they were all focused on their roles, Ethan was watching, and he noticed things. The watch, the shopping bags, the expensive dinners, and the contradictions. Money for luxuries, but not for his school trip. One evening, he sat across from me at our small kitchen table. "Mom," he asked quietly, "is Dad actually rich?" I looked at him for a moment. "What do you think?" He hesitated. "I think something's wrong. I think he's pretending." I reached for his hand. "Just wait a little longer." And I realized then how sharp he was. He saw the truth before anyone else, behind the scenes. Victoria was finalizing everything, every detail carefully structured. On the surface, the deal was simple. I gave up the house, the business, the cars, everything. In return, I received a small settlement and walked away, clean. But attached to that agreement was the real story. Every debt, every mortgage, every obligation, clearly documented, legally binding. When Daniel signed for the assets, he signed for all of it. Every burden, every consequence, every debt. His. The business debts would become his. Every lease, every obligation tied to those cars, every financial weight connected to the life he had insisted on keeping. It was all written clearly, precise, legal, unavoidable. Victoria once told me something I never forgot. "Legal documents are like poetry," she said, "expensive, complicated, and capable of ruining someone's life if you read them wrong." I think that was the moment I started appreciating them. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Daniel's lawyer, Andrew Whitaker, reached out to Victoria. He sounded cautious, measured, the way experienced attorneys sound when they sense something isn't right. "My client is taking on substantial assets," he said. "I'd like to request a full financial audit before we finalize, just to verify everything." Victoria didn't hesitate. "Of course," she replied calmly. "We'll provide whatever documentation you need." But when Andrew brought that suggestion to Daniel, he shut it down immediately. "No audits." Daniel said, confident, dismissive, "I built that company. I know exactly what it's worth. I'm not paying someone to tell me what I already know." Andrew tried again. More direct this time. "I strongly recommend verifying the numbers before you sign. This is significant." But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. "Chloe wants this done," he said. "I want this done. No delays." That was the end of the conversation. Andrew had been practicing law for decades. He recognized risk when he saw it. He also knew something else. You can't force someone to protect themselves from their own ego. So he did the only thing he could. He presented Daniel with a waiver, a document stating clearly that he had advised a full financial review and that his client was choosing to proceed without it. Against professional advice. Daniel signed it, without reading it, just like he signed everything else, quickly, confidently, carelessly. Never underestimate how powerful impatience can be, especially when someone thinks they're about to win. Chloe, without realizing it, had become one of the most valuable assets in my entire strategy. The night before the hearing, Daniel sent me a message. "Thank you for not making this difficult. I stared at that sentence for a long time. 15 years. 15 years of building his life, supporting his career, raising his son, holding everything together. And this was what he chose to say. "Thank you for making it easy for me to leave you." I typed back slowly. "I just want what's best for Ethan." And that was true. What was best for Ethan was already secured. His future, his stability, his protection, and a father who was about to learn a lesson he would never forget. Victoria called me later that evening. Thursday, 9 a.m. Final hearing. Judge Eleanor Grant. Her voice was steady, professional. "Are you ready?" I looked around my apartment. The secondhand furniture, the half-unpacked boxes in the corner, the small kitchen I had painted green because it reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "I've been ready for 3 years," I said, and I meant it. 3 years of waiting, 3 years of watching, 3 years of preparing for a single moment. It felt surreal, like standing at the edge of something I had already seen in my mind 100 times. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. Daniel would walk into that courtroom expecting to win, expecting to walk out with everything. He had no idea what he was about to receive, because what he thought was a prize was actually a collapse, and the best part, he had asked for it, clearly, confidently, in writing, with witnesses. I remember that morning with perfect clarity, the sunlight filtering through tall windows, the quiet echo of footsteps on polished floors, the low murmur of voices as lawyers prepared their cases. That courtroom held the end of 15 years and the result of 3 years of patience. Daniel arrived first. Of course he did. He was dressed exactly as I expected. Sharp, polished, confident. The charcoal suit I had helped him choose years ago fit him perfectly. Like nothing in his life had ever shifted. The new watch on his wrist caught the light every time he moved, flashing just enough to be noticed. He shook hands with Andrew Whitaker like a man closing a deal. Relaxed. Certain. Completely unaware. Through the open doorway, I caught a glimpse of Chloe. She was standing in the hallway, just outside the courtroom, not allowed inside, but close enough to feel involved. Perfect makeup, designer handbag. Scrolling through her phone like this was nothing more than an inconvenient appointment in an otherwise perfect day. Margaret was already seated in the gallery, dressed elegantly. Of course, prepared, ready to witness what she believed would be her son's final victory. When I walked in, she looked at me and smiled. That small, satisfied smile people give when they believe the outcome is already decided. I didn't react. I simply took my seat. I had arrived a few minutes after Daniel. Simple navy dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back neatly. I looked exactly how I needed to look. Tired, quiet, defeated. Like a woman who had nothing left to fight for. It was perfect. Convincing enough that even I almost believed it for a second. Judge Eleanor Grant entered the courtroom, and everyone stood. She carried the kind of presence that comes from decades of experience. Silver hair, reading glasses resting low on her nose. 30 years on the bench, she had seen everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to outplay the system. Very little surprised her anymore. She reviewed the file briefly, flipping through the documents with practiced efficiency. Then she looked up. "Parker versus Hayes," she said. "Final dissolution hearing. I understand both parties have reached an agreement." Andrew stood first. "Yes, Your Honor. My client, Daniel Hayes, is assuming all marital assets, including the primary residence, the real estate business, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, Mrs. Parker will receive a settlement of $50,000. Victoria rose beside me. That is correct. Your Honor, my client agrees to relinquish all claims to these assets and accepts the terms as presented. The judge's attention shifted to me. She studied my face carefully, looking for hesitation, for doubt, for any sign that I didn't fully understand what I was agreeing to. Mrs. Parker, she said, I need to confirm that you are aware of the scope of this agreement. You are giving up your claim to significant property, including the family home and the business you helped build. Are you certain this is your decision? I kept my voice soft, controlled, just slightly unsteady. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. And you are entering this agreement voluntarily. No one is pressuring you. No, Your Honor. I let my gaze drop briefly to my hands, then lifted it again. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I said quietly, I want this to be over. She watched me for a moment longer. I could almost see the questions forming in her mind, whether to intervene, whether to slow things down, whether I was making a mistake she should try to prevent. But I had representation. I was answering clearly. And I was an adult making a decision. Very well, she said at last. We will proceed. The clerk began distributing the final documents, page after page, dense legal language, signature lines appearing with steady repetition. Daniel signed quickly, effortlessly, barely glancing at the pages in front of him. He wanted this finished. He wanted to leave, to return to the life he believed he had secured. I signed slowly, carefully, each signature deliberate, each movement controlled. This wasn't just paperwork. This was the conclusion of 3 years of planning. I wasn't rushing it. I was experiencing it. Across the room, I saw Daniel glance toward Margaret. He smiled, confident, victorious. She nodded in return, satisfied. From the hallway, his phone buzzed. He checked it. During the hearing, probably Chloe. Encouragement, excitement. He didn't even try to hide it. That was who he was. Meanwhile, Andrew Whitaker was doing exactly what a good lawyer does, reviewing everything one final time, carefully, methodically. And then, he reached the last section, the part that mattered most. The main agreement was signed. Assets, settlement, everything finalized. Then Andrew reached the addendum. Liability disclosure. I watched his face change. Confusion, then realization. He leaned in. Sir, we need to talk. Daniel waved him off. Not now. Andrew insisted. You're assuming all debt. That made him look, really look. The numbers hit him all at once. The house, the business, the cars, all debt. Nearly 2 million, negative value. He hadn't won anything. He had inherited the collapse. This isn't right, he said, standing abruptly. This is fraud. Sit down, Judge Grant said firmly. He tried to argue, but the panic was already there. She reviewed the documents calmly. These are your liabilities, your assets, your responsibility. Andrew stepped in. I advised a financial review. He declined. I have proof. The waiver, signed, unread. Is that your signature? The judge asked. A pause. Yes. Then you accepted the risk. The agreement stands. Daniel turned to me, shaken. You knew. I handled your books for 11 years, I said. I knew everything. That's when it hit him. Not anger, not denial, understanding. I want to withdraw, he said. This isn't fair. It is final. The judge replied. The gavel came down. I stood, calm, collected. Then I looked at him one last time. You wanted everything except Ethan, I said quietly. I gave you exactly that. I walked out. Behind me. His voice rose in panic, and Andrew's answer was simple. I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing, Andrew said calmly. You refused. Through the glass doors, I saw Chloe's expression change. She looked at Daniel differently. Not like a winner, like a mistake. She was gone before I reached the elevator, heels echoing against the marble floor, not once looking back. Her exit was even faster than her entrance. At least she was consistent. I stepped outside into the April sunlight. Warm air, blue sky. Behind me, Daniel's voice rose angry, desperate, blaming everyone but himself. Ahead of me was something new, smaller, simpler, but finally mine. The collapse came quickly. Within 2 weeks, Chloe was gone from the house, leaving behind a short note. This isn't what I signed up for. The gray kitchen stayed empty. Within a month, Daniel tried to sell the house, but debt doesn't attract buyers, only banks, missed payments, and quiet conversations about short sales. Within 2 months, the business began to fail. Vendors filed claims, accounts were frozen. Everything he had built, everything I had helped build, started to crumble. By the 3rd month, he was meeting with bankruptcy lawyers. The man who once talked about expansion was now calculating survival. There wasn't much to save. Margaret's perfect son began calling relatives, asking for help, telling his version of the story, that he had been misled, that I had hidden things. But the truth was simple. Every loan had his name, every signature was his, every decision, his. That year, her holiday letter was noticeably shorter. Daniel is exploring new opportunities. That was one way to describe it. About a week after the hearing, Rachel called. Her voice was shaking. I didn't know it was this bad. I'm so sorry. I thought I didn't respond. Some endings don't need closure. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. She called again and again, then stopped. I imagine she's still waiting for Daniel to notice her. He won't. Margaret tried a different approach. She went through Ethan. Tell your mother I didn't know. Tell her I'm sorry. I want to talk. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, then said calmly, Mom's busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses. Margaret wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. We both got exactly what we deserved. Ethan understood everything now. Not because I explained it, because he saw it. The documents, the lies, the collapse. One evening, about a month later, he sat across from me in our small apartment. You waited 3 years, he said quietly. You knew, and you just waited. I needed to make sure you were protected. I told him softly. No matter what happened between your father and me, I had to know you'd be okay. The trust. $520,000. Safe, untouchable. His future secured. He didn't say anything at first. Then he hugged me. Really hugged me. Not the quick, distant kind. The kind that meant something. The kind that said he understood. That he saw me. That he was proud of me. 15-year-old boys don't do that often. I knew in that moment I had done something right. The $50,000 I received helped us start over. Rent, deposit, basic furniture, nothing fancy, but stable. And that was enough. The trust stayed untouched. Ethan's future was safe, and for the first time in years, I focused on myself. I enrolled in interior design classes. The dream I had given up at 23, I finally returned to it. This time, it was mine. I started small. My first client was a woman named Linda, just out of a long marriage. She stood in her empty apartment and asked, How do you start over? I smiled. One step at a time. We painted her kitchen green. She cried when she saw it. Happy tears. she said. It feels like a new beginning. 3 months after the divorce. Daniel showed up at my door. I barely recognized him. He looked worn down, tired in a way that went deeper than appearance. His confidence was gone. So was the watch. I didn't know it was this bad. He said quietly, I made mistakes. I studied him. This man I had loved for half my life. This man who had walked away from everything we built. Now standing there, asking without saying it. Can we talk? He asked. Maybe we can figure something out. He couldn't finish. He didn't need to. I already knew what he wanted. You asked for everything except Ethan. I said calmly, you got it. Please. Goodbye. Daniel? I closed the door. He stayed outside for a while, long enough for me to notice, long enough for me to know it was over. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat quietly in my living room, my grandmother's photo on the shelf, the recipe box beside it, the one thing that truly mattered. You were right, I whispered. About everything. Keep your own money. Know your worth. Never let anyone make you feel small. The apartment was quiet, simple, nothing like the life I used to have, but it was mine. Every choice, every detail, every inch. And for the first time in years, I was free. I chose to secure my future and my son's life, rather than chase revenge or recognition. That choice gave me peace, dignity, and a fresh start. If you would choose to protect yourself and build your own path like I did, write support so I know I wasn't alone in this. If not, you can write no or share your own different choice. I'd truly love to hear it. And if this story meant something to you, don't just scroll away, subscribe, like, and share this video. Your small action might help someone else feel stronger, wiser, and less alone today.